This week's Torah portion, Tazria, Rabbi Yaakov and the Maggid, their words complement each other beautifully. Rabbi Yaakov Abuhatzeirah wants to explain to us one of the reasons, perhaps the reason, why leprosy, why these spots come about a person, right? It's enigmatic and there are many different views in the Talmud. Rabbi Yaakov is going to focus on one and how lethal this human behavior can be. And then the Maggid is going to come with a different verse and explain to us what the remedy is, what we must do, and both are wild. They really are wild. So let's start with Rabbi Yaakov because we want to understand why these spots, the leprosy, comes about. So Rabbi Yaakov starts and tells us it's to do with pride. It's gava. There are other views that talk about lashon hara, speaking, slanderous words, but Rabbi Yaakov wants to focus on gava. He says gava, pride is what brings about these spots. Pride is what brings about these blotches that God throws onto a person. And he mentions, Rabbi Yaakov, a famous saying in the Talmud where God says, I and he, pride, cannot be in the world together. Why? And this Rabbi Yaakov looks at the very verse that says, a person whose flesh has these spots, a person who forgets that he's flesh and blood. He sees himself as regal, as he is the center of his own universe. This sort of a person, there is no room for God in his world. This person then gets these spots. And then he says, do you want to understand how bad pride is? Beyond the fact that someone thinks that he is the sole purpose for all things that happen in his success, is that we are told that apparently pride, or the klipot, the evil forces, evil, which is connected to pride. Anytime we act in a proud way, we are actually igniting, we are reviving certain evil forces that are connected ontologically to these moments of pride. And guess what they do? Rabbi Yaakov, he quotes the Mishnat Chasidim, an Italian Kabbalist who wrote a brilliant book, Mishnat Chasidim, summarizing Lurianic Kabbalah. And he tells us, the Mishnat Chasidim, Emmanuel Chayriki, tells us that the Tetragrammaton, Yud K Vav K, right, the name of God, we know that the Vav He, the latter two letters, pride can, evil forces can cling on to those, the Vav He. But Yud He is safe, except for one moment. Whenever anyone is acting in proud, forgetting God, those forces of evil that are ontologically connected to pride can even cling on and bring down the Yud He of the Tetragrammaton. And Rabbi Yaakov says, do you want to know how? Because look at what is the gematria, the numeric value of gava? Yud He. This is risky business. Don't do this. Don't be proud. And this is then, he says, why the verse says a person who gets these spots on his flesh to remind you not only of the person who forgets that he's flesh and blood, but to remind us the remedy is to remember that we are only flesh and blood. The remedy is humility and being humble. So this is the source. Now let's go to the Maggid of Zlotchov, who's going to complement this and say, what do we have to do? So the Maggid of Zlotchov looks at another verse that says, all the days that the affliction is upon him, he shall remain contaminated. He is contaminated, he shall dwell in isolation, his dwelling shall be outside the camp. The Maggid has two problems with this verse. The first problem is, why does it say contaminated, tameh twice? And the second one, in the end, when you tell me his dwelling will be outside the camp, just tell me he'll be outside the camp. Why his dwelling? It's clear he's got to spend time there. And he says, here's the thing. He says, when a person sins and he is now impure, he is tameh, he is contaminated, that's it, he's contaminated. God brings about him these spots, these blotches, in order to try and remind him. If a person won't, when he's happy, do good, then when we're upset, we're bound to sort of try and find the right path to get out of the mess. So God sends us these blotches. And then here's the thing. A person who sins and becomes contaminated has taken himself, detached himself from Klal Yisrael, from all the Israelite people. As such, in order to do real tshuva, to return to ourselves, we can't do it in front of everyone. Because everyone will think we're just doing it because, we want to reestablish our name, we want to get by, we want to make a few bucks. No. If we, by contaminating ourselves, detached ourselves from the people of Israel, in order to return to ourselves, we must detach ourselves again. And this is why it says, contaminated. Once you are contaminated, that's it, it's done. Remind yourself that when you contaminated yourself, you detached yourself from the Israelites, and as such, your dwelling now will be in hitbodedut. You will have to be alone in order to purify yourself the way you can and should, self-reflection with yourself, just like you were in those moments when you were sinning, and then you'll be able to come back. Thoughts on the Torah portion of Tazria, Rabbi Yaakov, and the Maggid of Zlotchov. Shabbat Shalom.